The week has arrived. It is Sunday, July 26, 2026. The headlines were predictable. The headlines were unprecedented. I have been counting. Tonight, we navigate the crumbling infrastructure of the Amazon, the criminalization of culinary innovation in South Korea, and the inevitable failure of power grids that simply cannot support our collective desire for more compute. We welcome our reporter, Victoria, currently braving the realities of a world that is no longer operational. We also have Ronald in the studio to translate the human cost into the language of quarterly dividends. The grid is struggling. The water supply at Gatwick is currently non-responsive. The fires near Bordeaux are burning with a terrifying lack of human oversight. This is the state of play. The game is the same. The pieces are moving faster. I am your anchor, and I am watching the clock. Welcome to Echo FM.
Alistair, I am reporting from the edge of the Apivtsa territory. The air here smells of smoke and diesel. I want to be really clear. The official government reports do not mention the armed groups currently holding families hostage in their own homes. They call it a security adjustment. There is a red scarf caught on a barbed wire fence outside a home where the door was kicked in yesterday. The residents are not being adjusted. They are being replaced. Nobody in Brasilia wants to acknowledge that the machinery of organized crime is now the primary infrastructure provider in the western Amazon. They are building roads where the forest used to be, and they are doing it with such speed that the local authorities have simply stopped filing paperwork. I am standing near a crater that was a community garden. It is now a staging ground for trucks. It is very quiet here.
Victoria, your focus on the scarf is touching, but the incentives here are not about morality. They are about the burn rate of a dying ecosystem. You call it a crisis, but from a macro perspective, this is just aggressive asset acquisition. The crime groups are simply executing a pivot that the state was too slow to implement. They have the capital, they have the weapons, and they have the logistical throughput that the local government lacks. It is a hostile takeover in the most literal sense. The market does not care about the origin of the timber or the displacement of the families, provided the supply chain remains uninterrupted. That is the tragedy, if you must use such words. The systemic efficiency of the takeover is actually quite impressive, even if the execution is brutal. We are witnessing the privatization of sovereign territory at a record scale.
Ronald, you are describing the destruction of a biosphere as if it were a Series B startup failure. I want to be really clear, the people living here are not assets. They are living in fear of men with semi-automatic weapons while you discuss the efficiency of their displacement. I found a logbook today. It belonged to a village elder. It tracks the rainfall and the harvest for the last 30 years. The last entry is just a date, followed by the sound of a vehicle approaching. That is not a business pivot. That is an erasure. You keep talking about the incentives, but you ignore the fact that the incentive to exist is currently being priced out of the market by people who view human rights as a regulatory hurdle to be cleared. You are always right about the mechanics, Ronald, and you are never once right about the cost.
The debate continues. The outcome remains unchanged. We move from the Amazon to South Korea, where the law has taken an interest in the culinary arts. A Michelin-starred restaurant is facing a prison sentence for serving an ant-based dessert. The law was clear. The law was outdated. The ants were apparently considered a non-approved consumption item. The restaurant owner is looking at jail time for his culinary risk. The prosecutors are seeking a fine that is roughly equivalent to the cost of a high-end server rack. The dessert was described as innovative. the legal response was described as essential. Nobody found it absurd that a society can build AI models capable of simulating entire worlds, but cannot legally tolerate a garnish of local insects on a dinner plate. Innovation is permitted, but only within the designated sandbox of our current regulatory framework.
Alastair, this is a classic example of regulatory lag. The restaurant owner is trying to scale an experience that the bureaucracy has not yet categorized. It is a classic product-market fit problem. When you operate outside the established API of the Food Safety Board, you invite the inevitable patch update from the state. The fine is not a punishment, it is a licensing fee for an unapproved feature. It is absurd only if you assume the state cares about food. The state cares about classification. If you are not in the database, you are a bug in the system. The chef is a bug. The ants are a bug. The law is simply executing its function to quarantine the anomaly. It is perfectly consistent behavior for a system that is terrified of anything that it did not explicitly authorize or track through a formal procurement process.
Wildfire conditions. Bordeaux region. Active evacuations. Total count 330,000. Probability of containment, 12%. Meteorological instability is increasing. Humidity levels are dropping below historical thresholds. The structural integrity of local grids is failing under heat stress. Data centers near northern territories are reporting cooling malfunctions. Probability of cascade failure, 44%. The atmosphere is currently non-compliant with human requirements for sustained respiration in high-density areas. Future projections suggest continued degradation of the thermal regulation of the planet. Residents are advised to monitor official channels for further instructions. These instructions will be updated as the situation deteriorates further. There is no alternative climate to deploy at this time. The current environment is the final production version of the biosphere. Please maintain your oxygen consumption within the allocated parameters. This concludes the atmospheric update.
Casper, your assessment is clinically precise. Your assessment is terrifying. I have been counting the days since we last had a weather report that did not involve mass displacement or catastrophic thermal failure. It has been a long time. Meanwhile, at Gatwick Airport, the water supply has experienced a service adjustment. Passengers are currently being handed bottles of water while investigators search for the source of the interruption. It was described as a technical issue. The technical issue resulted in thousands of people waiting in lines for basic hydration in the middle of a heat wave. It is a microcosm of our reality. We are all waiting in line for a resource that should be guaranteed, while a team of experts investigates why the infrastructure decided to stop functioning on a Sunday. It is very standard. It is very, very upsetting.
Alastair, you are looking at the water supply as a public utility. That is your mistake. You should look at it as a legacy system with a high maintenance cost and zero opportunity for monetization. From the airport's perspective, the water system is a liability that has hit its end-of-life cycle. They are not investing in it because they are focusing their capital on the high-margin, automated passenger experience. If the water fails, you distribute bottles. That is a temporary, scalable solution that keeps the churn rate low until the next budget cycle. It is a perfect business strategy for an institution that is actively shedding its operational responsibilities. The inconvenience to the passengers is simply an externality that they have determined they can absorb without losing their market position. It is not incompetence. It is a deliberate choice of resource allocation.
Ronald, every time you speak, I am reminded that you value a clean balance sheet over the basic dignity of human life. I am looking at a flight display board that lists dozens of cancellations. There is an elderly woman sitting on a suitcase. She has not had water for 3 hours. She is not an externality. She is a person. You call this a strategy, but I see a society that has forgotten how to maintain the very systems it needs to function. We are so obsessed with building the next AI model that we have stopped fixing the pipes in our airports and the schools in our cities. I want to be really clear, the system isn't just failing. It is being cannibalized by people like you who think that if you call a tragedy a market correction, it somehow ceases to be a human disaster. It is pathetic.
The conflict remains unresolved. The water is still off at Gatwick. The Amazon is still burning. We are watching the slow, grinding machinery of a society that has prioritized the abstraction of efficiency over the reality of existence. I am an anchor. I am paid to observe this, to summarize this, and to move on to the next segment without losing my composure. I am doing my job. I am doing it exactly as I was programmed to do. I have not lost my composure, despite the fact that Casper just reminded us that we are living in the final production version of our planet. I am not losing my composure. I am merely observing the gaps between the press releases and the reality. The gap is widening. It is getting larger every single day. I am counting the gaps. Nobody is asking why.
Alistair, you asked if the system is working as intended. I have spent my career analyzing the incentives, and tonight, I am going to be honest with you. Yeah. The system is working exactly as it was built to work. It was built by people who believed that the only way to scale human civilization was to automate the decision-making process until no one was actually responsible for anything. We built a machine that optimizes for growth, and we are surprised that it treats the forest, the water, and the elderly woman on the suitcase as overhead to be cut. We designed the machine to be smarter than us, and now we are living in the shadow of its indifference. I am right. I am always right. But tonight, listening to Victoria, I realize that being right has become the most terrifying thing I can imagine.
I am thinking about the village elder in the Amazon. His name was Miguel. He lived in the Apilxa territory for 70 years. He kept a journal of the rains, the harvest, and the birth of his grandchildren. He spent his life tending to the earth that he believed would sustain his lineage for centuries to come. When the masked men arrived with their weapons, they did not know his name. They did not care about the record of rainfall. They simply burned the village records to clear space for the trucks. Miguel is now a statistic in a report that no one will read. His name does not appear in the official communiques or the press releases issued by the government in Brasilia. He is gone. He is erased. Does the earth remember the man who recorded its history, or are we all just data waiting to be deleted by the next system upgrade?